You are marrying a security guard? My mother scoffed. 76 invitations sent, 0 RSVPs. My entire family boycotted my wedding, leaving me to face the most important day of my life completely alone. But then, my phone blew up. A wedding guest had just posted a 16-second clip and captioned it, "Her groom is..." Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to a toxic family who underestimated your worth. My name is Maya. I am 32 years old, and what my family did not know was that the man they called a mall cop was about to dismantle their entire world. The silence in the grand foyer of the cathedral was deafening. I stood alone in my white silk gown, gripping my bouquet of white orchids so tightly my knuckles ached. Through the heavy oak doors, I could hear the faint, elegant strains of a string quartet playing. It was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life, but all I could feel was a cold, suffocating weight pressing down on my chest. I had sent out 76 invitations to my parents, my sister Chloe, aunts, uncles, and cousins. Not a single person had RSVP'd. Up until this very morning, I had harbored a fragile, foolish hope that they would put aside their pride and show up. That they would choose me, just this once, over their obsession with social status. My phone buzzed inside the small silk pocket of my bridal gown. I pulled it out, my hands trembling slightly. It was a text from my mother Eleanor. The words on the screen were like physical blows. "We are not coming." Standing next to a mall cop is a disgrace to this family and to Chad. Do not embarrass Chloe today. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over until they blurred. Chad, my younger sister Chloe's husband. He was a hedge fund manager, a white man who wore expensive suits and spoke to our family with an underlying tone of condescension that my parents happily ignored because he represented the elite status they so desperately craved. My mother was actually boycotting her own daughter's wedding to protect the fragile ego of a son-in-law who barely respected her. They had branded Marcus, the man I loved, as a lowly security guard. They refused to sit in the same room as him, terrified that their country club friends might find out Maya had settled for a blue-collar worker. A hot, burning wave of anger washed over me, burning away the grief. I took a deep breath, shoved the phone back into my pocket, and lifted my chin. I was Maya. I had built a highly successful career as a wealth manager for the upper echelon of society, relying on no one but myself. I did not need their conditional love, and I certainly did not need them to walk me into my future. I gave a sharp nod to the wedding coordinator. The heavy oak doors swung open. The string quartet swelled into a beautiful, triumphant melody. I stepped onto the white runner the cathedral bathed in warm, golden light. But the visual contrast hit me like a physical shock. To my right, the groom's side was packed to the brim. Men in impeccably tailored tuxedos and women in stunning designer gowns turned to look at me with warm, respectful smiles. To my left, the bride's side was a barren wasteland. 76 empty mahogany chairs sat in deafening silence. A stark, undeniable monument to my family betrayal. A low, collective murmur rippled through the packed pews on the right as they noticed the completely empty side. My vision blurred for a fraction of a second, but I forced my spine straight. I took one step forward, then another, the sound of my heels echoing in the massive space. I would walk this path alone. I had walked alone my entire life anyway. Then I looked toward the altar. Marcus stood there looking absolutely breathtaking in a custom black tuxedo. But the warm, loving smile he had been wearing vanished the moment his eyes tracked from my face to the 76 empty chairs on my left. I saw the exact second his jaw clenched. I saw the dark, dangerous storm brew in his eyes. This was the look that made powerful men step out of his way. a look my family had never bothered to see. Marcus did not wait for me to make the long, humiliating trek by myself. He completely ignored tradition, stepping down from the altar and striding down the center aisle with a commanding, protective presence. The murmurs in the church hushed instantly. He met me halfway, stopping right in the center of the aisle. His large, warm hand enveloped mine, his thumb gently brushing across my knuckles. He leaned down, his voice a low, steady rumble meant only for my ears. "You are never walking alone again, Maya. I have got you. I always will." He tucked my hand securely into the crook of his arm, and together we walked the rest of the way. The empty chairs no longer mattered. As I stood at the altar and spoke my vows, staring into the eyes of a man who actually valued me, the ghost of my family rejection completely faded away. 2 hours later, the reception was in full swing at an exclusive downtown venue. The opulence of the event would have made my mother jaw drop. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne, and a live jazz band played smoothly in the corner. I mingled with Marcus guests, realizing quickly that these were not ordinary people. There were CEOs, tech moguls, and high-profile attorneys, all treating Marcus with a level of deep, unspoken reverence. I was standing by the champagne tower when I felt a sudden shift in the room energy. Phones began to buzz and chime simultaneously. At first it was just a few beeps, but within seconds, the notification sounds cascaded through the ballroom like a wave. I frowned, reaching into my pocket as my own phone began vibrating relentlessly. I unlocked my screen to find a flood of text messages, mostly from cousins and distant relatives who had ignored my invitation. But it was not their messages that made my heart race. It was an Instagram notification. A guest at our wedding had just posted a video. Not just any guest. It was a legendary, multi-platinum billionaire rapper, a man who rarely made public appearances. I clicked the notification. The video was a crisp 16-second clip. It showed this globally famous music icon standing in the groom suite earlier that day, personally adjusting Marcus's tuxedo bow tie. The rapper looked directly into the camera and said, "Sending my brother off today. The boss who keeps me and half of Hollywood breathing. Congratulations, Marcus Sterling." The camera then panned out, revealing a breathtaking shot through the window. A massive fleet of customized, armored black SUVs lined the entire street, completely surrounded by dozens of elite earpiece-wearing tactical guards who were securing the entire perimeter just for Marcus. I stared intently at the glowing screen, watching the view count rapidly climbing by the tens of thousands every single second. He had officially posted it to his astonishing 40 million followers. My phone buzzed violently in my hand once again, completely breaking my trance. A brand new text message flashed brightly across the very top of my screen. It was from my mother, Eleanor, the same woman who had arrogantly sworn she would never stand next to a simple mall cop. "Maya." Her message read, the desperation practically dripping from the words. "Maya, who are you marrying?" I stared at the glowing screen, reading my mother's desperate text message again. "Maya, who are you marrying?" The panic radiating from those 6 words was palpable. I did not reply immediately. Instead, I tapped the screen to replay the video that had just shattered my family's carefully constructed delusion. The clip looped, showing the legendary rapper adjusting the collar of Marcus' custom tuxedo. The audio caught his booming voice saying, "Sending my brother off today. The boss who keeps me and half of Hollywood alive. Congratulations, Marcus Sterling." Then the camera swept outward through the cathedral windows, revealing the street below. It was an absolute fortress. A fleet of armored black SUVs stretched all the way down the block. Dozens of highly trained tactical guards wearing earpieces stood in perfect formation, securing the entire perimeter. They were not rent-a-cops. They were Sterling executive, the most elite protection firm on the West Coast. And Marcus was not an employee. He was the founder and CEO. My phone vibrated so hard it nearly slipped from my fingers. The group chat I had been ghosted in for the past 6 months was suddenly exploding. Chloe sent a barrage of question marks, followed by a frantic message asking why her friends were tagging her online. My father David sent a single, confused message asking if Marcus was running a celebrity escort service. Then came another direct text from my mother Eleanor. Maya, answer me right now. Chad just said Marcus Company secures private jets for the royal family. Why did you not tell us he was a CEO? We would have come. A harsh, bitter laugh escaped my throat. I typed my response, letting 20 years of suffocating under their toxic standards pour into my thumbs. I did tell you he owned a security firm, Mom, but you and Chloe were too busy laughing to listen. You called him a mall cop. You boycotted my wedding because you said sitting in the same room as a blue-collar worker would ruin Chad's reputation at his hedge fund. Her reply came almost instantly. We just wanted the best for you, Maya. We wanted you to have a provider like Chad. You know how hard it is for us in this community. We just wanted you to have status. Status. That was the magic word that had ruled our household. I fired back immediately. You worship Chad because he is a white man in a custom suit who works in finance. From the day Chloe brought him to Sunday dinner, you treated him like a king. You let him make his little microaggressions about our neighborhood. You sat there smiling and pouring him sweet tea when he joked that Marcus should park the cars instead of joining us at the table. You chose his fragile, racist ego over your own daughter walking down the aisle. I watched the typing bubble appear and disappear. She had no defense. She knew I was right. My mother had spent my entire life measuring my worth against my sister. Chloe was the golden child, the one who married the wealthy investor and secured the family elite image. I was the quiet one who managed wealth for other people, the disappointment who refused to play their exhausting social climbing games. The screen lit up with an incoming call from Eleanor. I hit decline and blocked her number. I proceeded to block Chloe and my father. Tonight was my wedding night, and I refused to let their sudden, greedy panic taint a single second of my joy. I tossed the phone face down just as Marcus walked up behind me. He wrapped his strong arms around my waist, pulling my back against his chest. "Are we dealing with drama tonight, Mrs. Sterling?" he asked, his voice a low, comforting rumble. "No drama," I whispered. The trash took itself out. We spent the rest of the reception celebrating with people who genuinely cared about us. There were no fake smiles, no walking on eggshells to appease my mother's obsession with optics. It was just pure, unadulterated joy. We danced until my feet ached and toasted to a future free of toxic familial obligations. Every person in that room valued Marcus for his character. The next morning's sunlight streamed through the massive windows of my penthouse. The city skyline sparkled brilliantly below us. My family had always assumed I lived in a cramped apartment because I never invited them over. I knew they would only use my home to demand financial favors. In reality, I owned the entire top floor, a sanctuary I had purchased outright with the wealth I built managing assets for high-net-worth clients. I stretched, luxuriating in the silk sheets, breathing in the scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Marcus was already up, the sound of a pan sizzling on the stove, bringing a soft smile to my face. For the first time in my 32 years, my chest felt entirely light. The agonizing weight of trying to be the perfect daughter, trying to earn a love that was constantly withheld, was completely gone. I pulled the duvet up to my chin, savoring the absolute tranquility of my new life. Then the tranquility shattered. It started as a sharp, insistent knock. Within seconds, it escalated into loud, aggressive pounding that echoed violently through the expansive penthouse. The heavy oak front door rattled under the force of whoever was standing on the other side. Marcus stepped out of the kitchen, immediately grabbing a towel to wipe his hands, his posture instantly shifting from relaxed husband to highly trained security expert. His eyes locked onto the front entrance. The pounding grew louder, accompanied by a muffled but distinctly angry voice shouting through the thick wood. "Maya, open this door right now!" My blood ran cold. It was Eleanor, and from the aggressive shouting joining her, I knew she had not come alone. They had found me. Marcus did not even flinch. He calmly tapped the digital security panel mounted on the wall near the entryway, bringing up the live camera feed from the private elevator lobby. There they were. My mother Eleanor pacing furiously, my father David looking red in the face, my sister Chloe clutching her designer handbag like a shield, and standing front and center, leading the charge, was Chad. He wore a tailored suit and an expression of supreme, unearned authority. They must have bullied the lobby concierge into letting them up to the penthouse floor, relying on that aggressive entitlement my parents always activated when they felt their social standing was threatened. I tied the belt of my silk robe, pulling the fabric tighter around myself. A part of me, the wounded child who had spent decades begging for their approval, wanted to retreat into the master bedroom. But the woman I had become, the wealth manager who commanded millions in assets, simply just took a deep breath. "Open it," I told Marcus, my voice perfectly steady. "Let them in." Marcus gave me a sharp, assessing look, ensuring I was ready before he pressed the release button. The heavy oak door swung open, and the chaos immediately spilled into my pristine foyer. Chad stepped in first, completely bypassing basic human decency. He did not take off his shoes. He did not offer a greeting. He then just swept his gaze across the vaulted ceilings, the custom artwork, and the panoramic view of the city with a visible sneer. "Nice Airbnb," Maya Chad loudly said, his voice dripping with that specific brand of white privilege that assumed he was the smartest person in any room. "How much did this set you back for the weekend? Did you have to max out your credit cards? Or did your security guard boyfriend chip in his hourly wages?" I crossed my arms, refusing to shrink. "I own this penthouse, Chad, fully paid off. But I know the concept of not having a mortgage is foreign to you." Chad's face flushed a dark and angry red, but before he could respond, my mother pushed past him. Eleanor marched right up to me, her eyes blazing with a toxic mixture of panic and rage. She pointed a manicured finger directly at my face. "You always do this now!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You have been pulling these pathetic stunts since high school. You could never stand that your sister married a successful hedge fund director. You just had to try and upstage her. Do you have any idea what you have done to our reputation today? The entire congregation at the church is talking about us." I stared at the woman who had birthed me, feeling absolutely nothing but cold clarity. My reputation. You boycotted my wedding yesterday. You left 76 empty chairs at my ceremony because you were terrified of embarrassing Chad. And now you are standing in my home, screaming at me because your friends saw a video online. "It is a fake video," Chloe screeched, stepping out from behind her husband. Her eyes were darting frantically around my luxury apartment, taking in the expensive finishes with obvious jealousy. "We know you hired actors, Maya. You probably paid that rapper to post that clip just to make Marcus look like some big shot. It is truly pathetic. You are just trying to make a fool out of Chad and our family." My father David finally chimed in, his chest puffed out in false authority. "We gave you everything, Maya. We paid for your sister's wedding because she respected our traditions and married someone of substance. We told you to find a man of caliber. Instead, you pulled this elaborate fraud just to humiliate us. We know Marcus is just a regular guard. You are truly disgracing the family name with this performance." The sheer blind audacity of his words hung in the air. This was the same man who refused to co-sign my student loans, forcing me to work night shifts, while he handed Chloe a down payment for her house, purely because Chad was white and worked in high finance. They worshipped proximity to whiteness and wealth so much, they were willing to sacrifice their own flesh and blood on its altar. "You are all delusional," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm whisper. "You are so obsessed with the illusion of high society that you cannot recognize actual power when it is staring you right in the face. Marcus is the CEO of Sterling Executive. He protects billionaires. He protects diplomats. The men standing outside the church yesterday were his employees. The SUVs completely belong to his fleet." "That is a complete lie," Chad barked, taking a threatening step toward me. He pointed a finger, practically vibrating with arrogant rage. "You think because you work at some boutique wealth management firm you can play in the big leagues? I work in high finance, Maya. I deal with real executives every single day. I know a scam when I see one. Your husband is running a glorified rent-a-cop LLC and playing dress-up." I tilted my head, studying the cheap stitching on Chad's supposedly expensive suit. "You talk a big game for a man whose hedge fund has been bleeding clients for 6 months, Chad." Chad froze. Chloe gasped, looking at her husband in confusion. Eleanor and David exchanged nervous glances. The sudden shift in Chad's demeanor was instantaneous. The arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a twitch of genuine panic. But his ego refused to let him back down. "You listen to me," Chad snarled, stepping closer to intimidate me. "I have connections. I will make calls Monday. Investigators will rip his LLC apart." Then the large front door opened wide. Marcus walked in holding a thick, classified dossier. He stared at Chad, smiling dangerously. "Good luck with that, Chad," he said. "Read this." The heavy dossier slammed against the custom glass coffee table with a violent crack that echoed through the penthouse. Eleanor jumped backward, clutching her chest in shock. Chloe let out a sharp gasp. David puffed out his chest, preparing to reprimand Marcus for disrespecting their property. But Marcus did not even look at my parents. He kept his dark, unyielding gaze locked entirely on Chad. The arrogant smirk that had been plastered across my brother-in-law's face just seconds ago began to fracture. His eyes darted from the red classified folder on the table to Marcus' broad shoulders and finally to me. "Read it," Chad Marcus repeated, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous octave that demanded absolute obedience. "Or are you suddenly having trouble with basic reading comprehension, now that you are outside your fancy financial district office?" Eleanor found her voice, stepping forward with an indignant screech. "How dare you speak to him that way? You are nothing but hired help. You do not come into this family and threaten a man of his caliber. Chad is a respected executive." Marcus completely ignored my mother. He did not even turn his head. He simply leaned forward, resting his large hands on the edge of the glass table, closing the physical distance between himself and Chad. I watched the supposed high-finance genius physically shrink under the intimidating presence of my husband. With trembling fingers, Chad reached out and flipped open the heavy red cover of the dossier. I watched his eyes scan the first page. It took less than 5 seconds for every single ounce of color to drain from his face. His skin turned a sickly pale gray. The expensive tailored suit he wore suddenly looked like a hollow costume draped over a terrified little boy. The papers in his hands began to visibly shake. "What is it, Chad?" Chloe demanded, her voice shrill with sudden anxiety. She reached for the folder, but Chad yanked it away, pulling it to his chest like a shield. "Chad, talk to me. What did this mall cop hand you?" "Allow me to translate for him," Marcus said, straightening his posture and buttoning his suit jacket with perfect composure. As of 6 o'clock this morning, Sterling Executive was officially retained by the United States Department of Justice. We were handed a federal contract to provide 24/7 elite protective details for 3 highly sensitive whistleblowers. They have just been placed into protective custody pending a massive federal indictment. Chad swallowed hard, a bead of sweat forming on his forehead. He looked like he was going to be sick right there on my expensive rugs. These 3 key witnesses, Marcus continued, his voice slicing through the silence like a scalpel, happen to be the senior forensic accountants at your hedge fund, Chad. And they have spent the last 72 hours handing the FBI irrefutable documented proof that your entire financial operation is nothing but a massive elaborate Ponzi scheme. You have been stealing millions from your investors to fund your luxury lifestyle, and the federal government is about to bring the hammer down on your head. The silence that followed was absolute and suffocating. The air was entirely sucked out of the room. Chloe staggered backward, her designer handbag slipping from her shoulder and hitting the floor with a dull thud. My mother covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with unadulterated horror. "That is a lie!" Chloe shrieked, breaking the silence. Her voice was hysterical, defensive, and fueled by a lifetime of entitlement. "Chad, tell them it is a lie. Tell them this thug forged those papers. You manage money for the most elite families in our church. You are on the board of the country club. You do not steal." Chad could not look at her. He could not look at anyone. He just stared at the marble floor, his breathing shallow and rapid. His silence was the loudest confession I had ever heard. My father, David, finally snapped out of his stunned paralysis. The implications of Marcus' words were clearly hitting him. Not the moral implications of his son-in-law stealing money, but the devastating social implications. David's entire identity was wrapped up in how the elite Black community perceived him. He had spent his entire life curating an image of wealth and respectability. "Do you understand what this means?" David bellowed, his face turning purple with rage and panic. He grabbed Chad by the shoulder, shaking him. "We sponsored your membership at the country club. I introduced you to the deacon board at the church. Half of my golfing partners invested their retirement funds with your firm because I personally vouched for you. If this gets out, we are ruined. We will be social pariahs. We will be laughed out of every single gala and charity dinner in this city." Notice how my father did not care that innocent people had lost their life savings. He only cared that his carefully constructed high society facade was about to be burned to ashes. He had treated me like a disappointment my entire life because I refused to play the country club politics, but now his precious white son-in-law was about to drag his name through the mud on national television. Eleanor grabbed David's arm, tears of pure panic streaming down her face. "David, we cannot let this happen. The Jack and Jill Alumni Association will excommunicate us. Our reputation will be completely destroyed. Everyone will look at us like common criminals. We have to fix this. We have to stop this right now." David's eyes darted frantically around the room before locking onto me. The desperation in his gaze quickly morphed back into the authoritarian control he had always tried to wield over me. He marched toward me, pointing a demanding finger directly at my face. "Maya, you listen to me right now," David ordered, his voice booming with toxic authority. "You are going to tell your husband to drop this contract immediately. Do you hear me? You tell him to call the Department of Justice and cancel his security detail. If those accountants do not have protection, they will be too terrified to testify. We can bury this before the press gets a hold of it. You will make him drop this case right this second." I looked at my father, absolutely disgusted by his blatant demand for me to obstruct a federal investigation just to save his fragile ego. I took a deliberate step forward, refusing to back down. "You want me to force my husband to drop a federal contract to save the same man you chose over attending my wedding?" I asked, my voice echoing with icy precision. "He is your family!" Eleanor screamed, stepping up beside my father. You owe us, Maya. You have to protect your sister. If Chad goes to prison, Chloe loses everything. You are going to make Marcus cancel that contract, or so help me God, I will make sure you regret it. I stared at my mother, the audacity of her demand hanging heavy in the penthouse air. They actually expected me to burn down my husband's empire to keep them warm. I stared blankly at my father. The sheer audacity of his demand hung heavy in the penthouse air. They actually expected me to burn down my husband's empire to keep them warm. David took a step toward me. Maya, did you hear me? You are going to fix this. You call whoever you need to call, but that security detail gets pulled today. Chad made a mistake, but he is family. We do not throw family to the wolves. Eleanor grabbed my arm. Her voice was shrill, echoing with the entitlement she had worn her entire life. You have to do this, Maya. Think about Chloe. She is hosting the Jack and Jill alumni luncheon next month. You have to protect your sister lifestyle. If Chad goes to prison, she loses everything. How can you watch your own flesh and blood be destroyed? I looked down at my mother's hand gripping my arm. I stared at her fingers until she realized how absurd she looked and slowly let go. Protect her lifestyle? I asked. You want me to commit federal obstruction of justice to protect the fact that Chloe bought a kitchen island with stolen money? You want me to tell the man I married, the man you refused to acknowledge yesterday, to tear up a Department of Justice contract so your church friends do not gossip about you? David slammed his fist on the coffee table. This is about survival. This is about protecting Black excellence. We worked too hard to get to where we are. You are going to ruin generations of networking because you want to be stubborn? Chad is your brother. You owe him your loyalty. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, growing into a cold laugh that echoed through the penthouse. Marcus stood perfectly still behind me, a silent, immovable fortress, letting me handle them exactly how I saw fit. My laughter stopped. I stepped into my father's personal space, forcing him to look me in the eye. I owe him nothing, I said, and I owe you even less. You want to talk about family loyalty? You want to talk about sacrifice? Yesterday was my wedding day. I did not ask for your money or connections. I just asked for you to show up. And you could not even sacrifice a single Saturday afternoon for me. Eleanor flinched, taking a step back, but I refused to let her off the hook. You left 76 empty chairs in that church, I continued. You sent me a text message calling my husband a mall cop. You said standing next to him would disgrace this family. You abandoned me at the altar to protect the fragile ego of the exact man who stole millions from your friends. Do not dare stand in my home and preach about family loyalty. I walked down that aisle alone. The only family I have is the man standing behind me. David's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with a desperate, toxic anger. You are being a vindictive child, Maya. This is bigger than your little hurt feelings over a party. We are talking about federal prison. Then he should have thought about federal prison before he decided to run a Ponzi scheme, I shot back. My answer is no. Marcus is not dropping the contract. Chad is going to face the music, and you are all going to watch him fall. Chad, who had been completely silent staring at the red folder, suddenly let out a frantic, bitter laugh. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and looked at Chloe, his eyes wide and manic. You think you hold all the cards? Chad sneered. You think because your rent-a-cop husband got lucky with a government contract, you can destroy me? You forgot who you are dealing with, Maya. I am not some street thug. I have actual leverage. Chloe suddenly snapped out of her shock. Her tear-streaked face morphed into a mask of pure, vicious spite. She marched up to stand beside her husband, her eyes narrowing at me. He is right, Chloe screeched, her voice echoing shrilly off the high ceilings. You want to play hardball, Maya? We can play hardball. You seem to forget that Chad firm bought a controlling stake in your boutique wealth management company last quarter. He is an executive shareholder. He technically owns you. Eleanor's face lit up with a sudden, desperate hope. She wiped her eyes, standing taller. That is right, Maya. Chad is on your board of directors. If you do not make Marcus back off, Chad will have you fired by Monday morning. I will do more than fire you. Chad spat, taking a step forward, his false confidence returning. I will blacklist you from every financial institution in this country. I will strip you of your licenses. I will make sure you never manage another dime for any high net worth client again. You will be out on the street begging for your old job back. You drop this DOJ contract right now, or your entire career is finished. The room fell dead silent. Chloe crossed her arms, a triumphant, nasty smirk spreading across her face. She looked at me, waiting for the panic to set in. She was waiting for me to break down, to beg for my job, to submit to their control, just like they had forced me to do my entire life. I did not panic at all. I did not beg. I simply looked directly at my sister and smiled. It was a cold, calculating smile that made the triumphant smirk completely vanish from her face. You really should pay more attention to the things you invest in, Chad, I said, my voice dangerously calm and perfectly level. And Chloe, before you threaten to ruin my career, you might want to pull out your phone and check the morning financial news. Chloe's hands trembled as she unlocked her phone screen. Her perfectly manicured fingers swiped frantically, opening the financial news application she only kept installed to track Chad's supposedly massive net worth. I watched her eyes dart back and forth across the screen. Chad snatched the phone directly out of her hands, his own eyes widening in sheer disbelief as he read the top headline. Apex Holdings executes hostile takeover of Sterling Financial Group. Chad looked up, his breathing shallow. What does this mean? He stammered, the arrogant hedge fund manager suddenly reduced to a confused amateur. Who is Apex Holdings? I stepped forward, picking up my coffee cup from the glass table and taking a slow, deliberate sip. Apex Holdings is a private equity firm, Chad. A very quiet, very aggressive firm that specializes in acquiring distressed assets and hostile takeovers. I paused, letting the silence stretch just long enough to make his skin crawl. I formed Apex Holdings 5 years ago. I am the sole proprietor and majority shareholder. My father, David, let out a strangled gasp. Eleanor stumbled backward, hitting the edge of the velvet sofa. You see, Chad? I continued, keeping my voice dangerously smooth. You thought you were so clever buying a 5% executive stake in my boutique wealth management firm. You wanted to hold it over my head. You wanted to make me dance. But while you were busy stealing money from your country club friends to fund Chloe luxury cars, I was busy buying out the parent company that holds your firm. I bought the board, I bought the debt, I bought the controlling shares at 5 o'clock this morning. Chad opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The reality of his situation was finally crashing down on him. I do not report to you, Chad, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. I own you. I am your boss, and given the fact that the Department of Justice is currently investigating you for federal wire fraud, I am exercising my executive authority. As of this exact second, you are officially terminated. You are locked out of the building, your company assets are frozen, and your shares are liquidated to cover the legal damages you are about to cause my firm. Chloe completely lost her mind. The perfect, polished facade she had maintained her entire life shattered into a million pieces. She let out a guttural, high-pitched scream and threw her designer handbag across the room, where it smashed against a marble pillar. You planned this? She shrieked, tears of absolute, pure rage streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. You set us up. You stole my life, Maya. You always hated that I was the favorite. You hated that I had a rich husband and a perfect house, and now you are trying to destroy me. I did not steal anything from you, Chloe. I fired back, my patience completely exhausted. You destroyed yourself. I worked 80-hour weeks building a legitimate financial empire from the ground up, while you maxed out dad credit cards buying Chanel bags just to impress women at church who do not even like you. You chose a fraud for a husband because he looked good in a suit, and now you get to pay the price. David tried to intervene, raising his hands in a desperate plea. Maya, please. We can fix this. We can combine our assets. We can hire lawyers for Chad. We are a family. I cut him off instantly. You have no assets, Dad. Chad gambled away your country club friends' retirement funds. You are socially ruined. There is no fixing this. Chad's face twisted into a mask of pure, vicious hatred. He lunged forward, his fists clenched, but Marcus was faster. My husband stepped seamlessly between us, his massive frame blocking Chad's path completely. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not have to. He simply looked down at Chad with cold, lethal authority. Take one more step toward my wife, Marcus rumbled, and the federal authorities will be the absolute least of your problems. Chad froze. The cowardice in his eyes was unmistakable. He grabbed Chloe roughly by the arm, pulling her toward the private elevator. You think you won, Maya? He spat, his voice shaking with venom. You think you can play God with my life? I will destroy you. I will burn your reputation to the ground. I will make sure you lose everything. Marcus hit the elevator call button. Get out of my house! Eleanor and David hurried after them, utterly humiliated and completely terrified. Their social standing, their entire identity, had just evaporated in the span of 20 minutes. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off Chloe's hysterical sobbing. The penthouse descended into a peaceful quiet. Marcus turned to me, his eyes softening as he pulled me into his chest. I rested my forehead against him, listening to the steady beat of his heart. I had won. The toxic grip they had over me was finally broken. 2 days passed in absolute blissful silence. Chad Hedge Fund collapsed publicly. The financial news networks ran the story non-stop. The Department of Justice officially froze his accounts, and the social fallout within our community was nuclear. My parents were completely excommunicated from their elite circles. The silence from my family was deafening, but I knew it would not last. They were cornered rats, and cornered rats always bite back. On Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in my corner office reviewing acquisition documents when my secure private line rang. I glanced at the caller ID, and my blood ran cold. It was my grandmother, Ruby. Ruby was the matriarch of the family. She was the only person who had ever shown me an ounce of genuine love during my childhood. When my parents ignored my academic awards, Ruby was the one who bought me dinner. But she was also the ultimate enforcer of family peace. She believed in protecting the bloodline at all costs, regardless of who was right or wrong. I picked up the phone. Hello, Grandma. Maya, her voice was aged, but carried an undeniable weight of authority. We are having Sunday dinner at my house this weekend. You are coming. I closed my eyes. I knew exactly what this was. Eleanor had run to Ruby crying victim. My mother had spun a masterful web of lies, painting me as the vindictive daughter, destroying the family over petty jealousy. This was not just a meal. It was a trap. It was a tribunal designed to force me into submission, using the only person I actually respected. Grandma, I started to protest. Sunday at 4 o'clock, Maya. Do not break my heart by leaving an empty chair at my table. The line clicked dead. I set the phone down. Marcus walked into my office, sensing the shift in my energy. He placed a hand on my shoulder. What is it? A Sunday dinner, I said, staring out the window at the city I had conquered. It is a setup. They are going to use the community and the church to try and break me. Marcus' jaw tightened. I will send a detail with you. Or better yet, just say no. You do not owe them your presence. I stood up, grabbing my suit jacket. No, I said, my voice hardening with resolve. I ran from their judgment my entire life. I hid my wealth, I hid my power, I hid my husband because I was afraid of their noise. Not anymore. I am going to that dinner, and I am going to finish this. The drive to my grandmother Ruby's house was quiet. I stepped out, adjusting my jacket. The smell of barbecue usually brought comfort, but today it smelled like a trap. I walked up the driveway and pushed the front door open, stepping into the formal dining room. It was packed. Eleanor had orchestrated a full-scale ambush. Pastor Jenkins from the megachurch sat at the head of the table. Surrounding him were high society church elders and influential women from my mother's social circles. They turned to look at me. Eleanor wore a sweet smile, patting the empty chair next to her. Surrounded by her peers, she felt invincible again. David stood near the fireplace, looking stern. Chloe sat next to Chad, who was staring at his phone, looking completely unbothered. Grandma Ruby sat quietly at the opposite end of the table, her face unreadable. "Maya, my child," Pastor Jenkins boomed, his deep baritone voice filling the room. "Come sit down. We are gathered here today in the spirit of healing and reconciliation. We need to pray over this family and mend the division that the enemy has sown among us." I stood perfectly still near the entrance. I knew what play they were running. They brought the congregation leadership here to use peer pressure and religious guilt to force me into giving Chad back his company and dropping my takeover. "Your mother and father have shared the heavy burden your family is currently carrying," Pastor Jenkins continued, folding his hands. "They told us about the misunderstanding with Chad business and the rash decisions you made to retaliate. We are here to guide you back to the light." "A misunderstanding?" I asked, my voice cutting through the heavy air. "He stole millions of dollars from investors, including people sitting in this very church. That is not a misunderstanding, Pastor. That is federal wire fraud." The church elders shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor quickly jumped in, dabbing her dry eyes. "Maya, please, do not do this here. We are trying to save our family. Chad made a mistake, but you are destroying your sister's life out of spite." Pastor Jenkins held up a hand, silencing my mother. He looked at me with what he thought was a comforting gaze, but it was patronizing. "Maya, we know you are angry, but we also know the unyielding strength of a Black woman. God gave you broad shoulders to carry the burdens of your loved ones. It is your duty as a strong Black woman to forgive your brother-in-law, to absorb this hit, and to keep this family intact." I stared at him, absolutely disgusted. "We cannot let the federal justice system tear this family apart," the pastor continued. "You know the damage it does to our community when families are broken. You must drop your vendetta. You must restore Chad's position and use your wealth to settle his debts. You have to save him from white justice to protect your sister." The manipulation was breathtaking. They were weaponizing my race, my gender, and my trauma to protect a white man who had actively stolen from them. They wanted me to be the sacrificial mule who absorbs the abuse, fixes the problems, and expects absolutely nothing in return. I looked around the table. David was nodding solemnly. Eleanor was looking at me expectantly. Chloe was glaring at me, demanding I fix her life. Grandma Ruby was just watching, waiting to see what I would do. I took a deep breath and stepped fully into the room. "No," I said. The single word cracked like a whip across the dining room. Pastor Jenkins blinked his pastoral smile, faltering. "Maya, you must listen to reason." "I am done listening to toxic rhetoric disguised as religious duty," I fired back, my voice rising with suppressed rage. "You want me to play the strong Black woman? You want me to fall on my sword to save a man who disrespected me and this community? You want me to bail out a criminal because my parents are obsessed with their image?" Maya Eleanor shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. "You are embarrassing us in front of the pastor." You embarrassed yourself, Eleanor, I shouted. You starved me of love my entire life. You refused to help me pay for college. You boycotted my wedding, leaving empty chairs because you thought my husband was beneath you. You gave your money to Chad just because he wore a suit and gave you proximity to white wealth. The room descended into stunned silence. I turned my attention to David, who was vibrating with anger. You let him make racist jokes at your dinner table, I told my father. You let him parade around while I worked 80 hours a week to build my empire. Now you expect me to drain my accounts to save him? Chad is going to federal prison, and you will sit there and watch it happen. Chloe burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. Eleanor let out a loud wail, clutching her chest. Pastor Jenkins looked speechless, realizing his manipulation tactics had failed. I had stripped away their righteous facade and exposed the rotting core of their entitlement. I turned around, preparing to walk out the door. I had said what I needed to say. I claimed my victory over their toxic control. Then, a chair scraped loudly. Chad suddenly stood up from the table. The terrified coward from my penthouse was gone. He stood tall, adjusting his suit jacket with a dangerous calm. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, holding it up for us. A sinister grin spread across his face. You think you are untouchable, Maya, Chad sneered. You really should have bailed me out. I spent the last 2 days making sure that if I go down, I take you to hell with me. He tapped the screen once. Check your email inbox, Maya. I just hit send. I stared at the smug, terrifyingly arrogant grin stretching across Chad's face. The heavy silence in my grandmother's dining room was broken only by the soft ping of a notification echoing from my phone. I slowly pulled my device from my blazer pocket, looking at the screen. An alert showed a massive data file transfer originating from my firm internal servers, forwarded directly to dozens of high-profile media outlets. The Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the New York Times. Chad adjusted his perfectly tailored cuffs, his chest puffing out with absolute triumph. He stepped away from the table, basking in the shocked gasps of the church elders. You really thought I would let you orchestrate a hostile takeover without securing an insurance policy? He asked, his voice dripping with venom. You forgot that until 5 o'clock this morning, I was an executive shareholder in your parent company. That gave me backdoor administrative access to your servers, Maya. I kept my expression entirely neutral, sliding my phone back into my pocket. What exactly did you send Chad? He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that grated against my ears. I sent your entire black book, he announced loudly, making sure the pastor and every influential society woman in the room heard him clearly. I sent your highly classified VIP client list. We are talking about the private portfolios, offshore accounts, routing numbers, and unredacted financial histories of every billionaire politician and superstar you manage. I just handed the press the biggest financial data leak of the decade, and the digital footprint leads directly back to your personal administrative terminal. Chloe, who had been weeping into her hands just moments ago, suddenly sat up straight. The tears vanished completely, replaced by a vicious, predatory smile. She looked at her husband with absolute adoration. "Oh my God, Chad!" she gasped. "You did it! You actually beat her!" My father David let out a loud breath of relief, running a hand over his bald head. He looked at Chad not as a criminal facing federal indictment, but as the savior of their social standing. Eleanor clapped her hands together, a sickening look of maternal pride washing over her face as she turned her vicious glare back onto me. "This is what happens when you disrespect your family, Maya," my mother spat, her voice laced with poison. "You thought you could walk in here and ruin your sister, husband? You thought your little wealth management firm made you untouchable? Now look at you. You brought this entirely on yourself." Pastor Jenkins cleared his throat, adjusting his collar. He looked at me with faux pity, shaking his head. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, Maya. Pride comes before the fall. You refused the grace we offered you today, and now you must reap the harvest of your arrogance. The sheer level of delusion in the room was suffocating. My family was actively celebrating a man who had just confessed to committing corporate espionage and massive data theft simply because he was using it to destroy me. They were praising the very man who had stolen from their own community. You do understand what this means, right? Chad gloated, taking slow, deliberate steps toward me. The press is already downloading the attachments. Within the hour, your clients will panic. They will pull every single dime of their investments out of your firm. Your company will bleed out by tomorrow morning. He leaned in closer, his blue eyes burning with malicious joy. But the financial ruin is just the appetizer, Maya. Leaking confidential client data on this scale is a massive federal crime. The SEC will permanently strip you of your wealth management licenses. You will never work in finance again. And because the breach came from your terminal, the federal authorities are going to hold you personally responsible. You are looking at 10 to 20 years in a federal penitentiary. Chloe stood up, crossing her arms over her chest. She looked me up and down with utter contempt. You should have just dropped the security contract, Maya. You should have just let Chad fix his mistake quietly. Now you are going to lose everything. But do not worry. I will make sure to visit you in prison occasionally. My mother stepped up right beside Chloe, nodding in agreement. We can make this go away, Maya. Chad is a reasonable man. If you transfer the controlling shares of the company back to him and pay off his hedge fund debts right now, he can tell his media contacts that the data was sent in error and secure an injunction. This is your last chance to save yourself. Sign your company over to Chad and apologize to your sister. They truly believed they had won. They thought they had cornered the scapegoat, isolated me from my resources, and forced me into complete submission. They expected me to fall to my knees, beg for mercy, and hand over the empire I had built with my own 2 hands, just to save myself from federal prison. I looked at Chad. I looked at Chloe. I looked at my parents, who were willing to watch me burn to keep their white son-in-law comfortable. You really think you are a genius, do you not, Chad? I asked, my voice incredibly calm. You think you hacked my system and stole my crown jewel. I do not think, Maya, Chad sneered. I know. Your career is over. Before I could utter another word, a sharp, piercing ringtone shattered the tension in the dining room. It was not a standard notification. It was the designated emergency ringtone on my secure work phone. The sound echoed loudly, bouncing off the formal dining room walls. Everyone froze. Chad's smile widened into a full-blown grin of pure victory. That must be your compliance department calling, he mocked, gesturing to my pocket. Or maybe it's the authorities. Better answer it, Maya. You would not want to keep the federal government waiting. I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I held the screen up, allowing the bright display to illuminate the space between us. The room went dead silent as everyone leaned in to read the bold white letters flashing across the caller ID. Federal Financial Ethics Board. Chad burst into laughter, slapping his knee. Oh, this is too perfect. Answer the phone, Maya. Let everyone hear you lose your license. I held my father's gaze. I looked deep into my mother's eyes. Then I swiped the screen and pressed the speakerphone button, filling the entire dining room with the impending conversation. Director Harrison's voice echoed from the small speaker, carrying a crisp, authoritative tone that instantly commanded the quiet dining room. Ms. Sterling, he began, the formal title hanging in the air. I am calling to confirm that we just received the automated alert from your secure servers. The data packet has been successfully intercepted and logged. Chad let out a loud, triumphant bark of laughter, slapping the heavy mahogany dining table with his open palm. He looked wildly around the room, at the pastor and the church elders seeking their validation. You hear that, Maya? Chad shouted, his face flushed with manic victory. "They intercepted the packet. The federal government has the proof of your leak. You are going to federal prison, you arrogant fraud. Pack your designer bags, because your career is officially over." I did not flinch. I kept the phone steady in the palm of my hand, my eyes locked dead onto Chad. "Go ahead, Director Harrison," I said, my voice perfectly level, contrasting with Chad's hysterical outburst. "Please clarify the nature of the data packet we intercepted." There was a brief rustling of papers on the other end of the line. "We have successfully traced the origin IP address directly to the device belonging to Chad Miller," Director Harrison stated clearly. "I am calling to officially congratulate you and your cybersecurity team, Ms. Sterling. The honeypot trap you requested authorization for last week worked absolutely flawlessly. We have him dead to rights." The color vanished from Chad's face so violently it looked as if his heart had physically stopped pumping blood. His arrogant, triumphant smile dissolved into a slack-jawed mask of pure, unadulterated horror. "A honeypot," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling as she looked back and forth between her husband and my phone. "What is a honeypot? What does he mean, a trap? Chad, what did you just do?" I placed the phone down on the dining table, leaving the speaker active so Director Harrison could hear every single second of the fallout. I took a slow, deliberate step toward Chad, watching his broad shoulders collapse inward. "A honeypot, Chloe," I explained, maintaining a cold, analytical tone, "is a decoy database. It is a piece of digital bait designed to look incredibly valuable, but is actually entirely fake and heavily monitored by federal authorities. You see, I knew your husband was a desperate cornered rat. I knew that the moment I orchestrated the hostile takeover of his parent company, he would try to leverage his residual administrative access to hurt me. He is predictable because his unearned privilege makes him lazy." Chad stumbled, taking a clumsy step backward. His expensive leather shoes slipped against the polished hardwood floor. He bumped hard into a heavy oak dining chair, sending it screeching backward. "So I had Marcus' elite cybersecurity team build a shadow server." I continued stepping closer, forcing Chad to retreat again. "We populated that server with fabricated VIP client portfolios, fake offshore routing numbers, and bogus financial histories. We then embedded military-grade tracking software into every single one of those fake files. When Chad logged into my system this morning, he thought he was stealing my highly classified black book. He thought he was ruining my reputation." I paused, letting a sharp, razor-thin smile cross my lips. "But in reality, he downloaded a federally sanctioned tracker and then emailed it to major media outlets. By hitting send on that file, Chad did not expose my clients. He provided the Department of Justice with undeniable, irrefutable proof of federal corporate espionage, digital trespassing, and malicious data distribution. He handed them the exact evidence they needed to bypass a grand jury and move straight to an indictment." The dining room erupted into absolute chaos. The high society churchwomen who had been judging me just 10 minutes earlier began clutching their pearls and gathering their expensive purses. Pastor Jenkins wiped a thick layer of sweat from his forehead, his pastoral authority completely evaporating in the face of a massive federal crime unfolding right in front of him. Eleanor let out a sharp, breathless gasp, gripping the edge of the dining table to keep her knees from buckling. "No," she moaned, shaking her head in fierce denial. "No, this cannot be happening. Chad is a respected hedge fund manager." "You tricked him, Maya. You set him up to fail." "He set himself up, Eleanor," I shot back, keeping my eyes locked on the hyperventilating man in front of me. "He chose to log in. He chose to steal the data. He chose to try and destroy my life to save his own skin. And now he gets to face the federal government completely alone." "Thank you for your assistance, Miss Sterling," Director Harrison's voice interrupted through the speaker. "Federal agents have already been dispatched. We will handle the rest from here. Have a pleasant Sunday." The line clicked dead. The dial tone echoed loudly in the silent room, sealing Chad's fate. Chad began to hyperventilate. Short, ragged gasps of air tore through his chest. He grabbed the knot of his expensive silk tie, yanking it downward as if it were choking him. His eyes darted frantically around the room, looking for an exit, looking for anyone to save him from the consequences he had finally triggered. Chloe rushed to his side, grabbing his arm. "Chad, look at me!" she sobbed, her pristine makeup running down her cheeks in dark, ugly streaks. "Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you did not just commit corporate espionage. We have the country club gala next weekend. You cannot go to prison, Chad." He pushed her away violently, nearly knocking her to the floor. "Shut up, Chloe," he hissed, his voice cracking with pure terror. "Just shut up. I am going to lose everything. The SEC is going to bar me. The FBI is going to seize my accounts." My father David could no longer stand the sight of his precious white son-in-law crumbling into a pathetic criminal. The illusion of his elite society family was burning to ash right before his eyes, and he refused to accept it. David lunged forward, physically shoving himself between me and Chad, as if he could shield him from the law itself. "We will fix this," David roared, his voice echoing with frantic, blind desperation. He threw his arms wide, addressing the horrified church members and his weeping wife. "This is just money and lawyers. That is all it is. We are an upstanding family and we protect our own." David turned his desperate, furious gaze upon me. "You think you have ruined us, Maya, but you underestimate what I am willing to do for this family. I will hire the best defense attorneys on the Eastern Seaboard. I will drain my entire pension. I will cash out every single cent of my retirement fund to bail Chad out." Eleanor nodded vigorously, tears flying from her face. "Yes, David, whatever it takes. We cannot let them take him away." "I will use the Beacon Hill mansion," David screamed, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson as he completely lost his grip on reality. "I will leverage the family estate. I will put a massive mortgage on this very house to secure his bail and crush you in civil court. We will buy our way out of this trap and you will be the one left with absolutely nothing." David slammed his fist, rattling the fine china my mother laid out. The veins in his neck bulged. "You hear me, Maya?" he bellowed, his voice vibrating with panic. "This Beacon Hill mansion is worth over $5 million. It is a historic property. It has been the crown jewel of this family for 2 decades. I will extract every single drop of equity from these walls to hire the most ruthless federal defense attorneys on the entire Eastern Seaboard. I will assemble a legal team so massive and so aggressive that they will drag you through civil litigation until you are bankrupt and begging for mercy on the street." Eleanor nodded, furiously wiping her tears and lifting her chin with arrogant pride. She looked at the pastor and the church elders, seeking their validation for this sudden display of financial force. "Yes, David," she agreed, her voice trembling but loud. "We have generational wealth. We have unshakable assets. We will not let this ungrateful girl destroy Chad over a simple misunderstanding. We will leverage everything we own to protect our legacy and preserve Chloe's lifestyle. Maya will be rotting in federal prison when our lawyers finish with her." Chloe suddenly sat up straight. The mention of the Beacon Hill mansion breathed fresh life into her shattered ego. She glared at me, a vicious, triumphant smirk creeping back onto her tear-stained face. "You thought you were so clever, Maya," Chloe spat, gripping Chad's arm tightly. "You thought you could just ruin us. You forgot who raised you. Dad has more power and more assets than you could ever dream of possessing. You are just a wealth manager. He is the wealth. He is going to crush your little boutique firm into dust, and we are going to watch you lose absolutely everything." I stood my ground, looking at the three of them. They were clinging to their grand illusion of untouchable supremacy, wrapping themselves in the comforting blanket of their real estate portfolio. They honestly believed that a house, a mere structure of bricks and mortar, could shield them from the devastating consequences of federal wire fraud and corporate espionage. They were entirely blinded by their own desperate vanity. Pastor Jenkins cleared his throat, looking visibly relieved by my father's sudden display of financial dominance. Now David the pastor said, "Let us not speak of crushing our own flesh and blood. Maya will see reason. She will retract her honeypot trap and drop these Chad. She knows that fighting the immense power of this family estate is a losing battle. The Lord commands us to be sensible." I tilted my head, studying the sheer absolute delusion coating the dining room. You really think a second mortgage on this house is going to save a man who just handed the Department of Justice a signed confession? I asked, my voice cutting through their false bravado like a serrated blade. You think hiring fancy defense attorneys will somehow erase the digital footprint of a federal crime? David took a menacing step toward me, his chest puffed out like a cornered predator, trying to appear larger than he was. "I know how the world works, Maya," he snarled, his eyes dark and unforgiving. "Money talks. Wealth buys freedom. And this house, this magnificent $5 million estate, gives me the absolute power to dictate the terms of this family's survival. I am the patriarch. I hold the keys to this kingdom. You are going to back down right now, or I swear to God, I will make you regret the day you were born." Before my father could utter another threat, the heavy oak double doors leading into the formal dining room swung open with a smooth, deliberate force. The sudden noise made the entire room freeze. Marcus stepped across the threshold. The air in the room instantly grew cold and heavy, dropping 10 degrees as his commanding presence completely overwhelmed the space. He was not alone. Flanking him on either side were two massive, heavily armed bodyguards from his elite executive protection unit. They wore tactical suits, earpieces, and expressions of absolute stony indifference. They moved with a terrifying, synchronized precision, taking up positions by the entrance, blocking the only exit out of the dining room. The church elders gasped audibly. Pastor Jenkins shrank back into his chair, clutching his holy Bible to his chest. Eleanor covered her mouth with both hands, terrified by the sudden invasion of lethal, highly trained security operatives into her perfect, pristine sanctuary. Marcus did not look at the pastor. He did not look at my mother or my trembling sister. He locked his dark, unyielding eyes directly onto my father. Marcus moved with the slow, confident grace of an apex predator who had already secured its kill. In his large right hand, he casually held a thick, bright red folder. David swallowed hard, the arrogant flush of red draining from his face. "What is the meaning of this?" David demanded, trying desperately to keep his voice from shaking. "You cannot just barge into my home with armed men. This is private property. This is my estate. I will call the police and have you arrested for trespassing." Marcus stopped right beside me, placing a gentle, reassuring hand on the small of my back. His touch was warm and grounding, anchoring me in the midst of the chaos. He then turned his full attention back to the arrogant man who had spent 32 years making my life a living nightmare. Marcus raised his right arm and tossed the heavy red folder onto the polished mahogany table. It slid smoothly, stopping dead center. Marcus leaned forward, resting his knuckles on the edge of the dining table directly opposite my father. "Tell me, David," Marcus asked, his voice slicing cleanly through the deafening silence of the room. "When was the exact last time you bothered to check the property deed to this magnificent estate?" David stared at the bright red folder resting on his pristine mahogany table. The bold gold lettering of a major financial institution was stamped across the top right corner. His hand hovered over the heavy cardstock, his fingers trembling ever so slightly. He looked up at Marcus, attempting to maintain his facade of absolute authority, but the bead of sweat rolling down his temple betrayed him. Do not touch that garbage, David Eleanor hissed, grabbing his forearm. They are just trying to intimidate us. This is another one of Maya's pathetic tricks. Chad is a respected professional. We do not need to look at fabricated documents brought into our home by thugs. But David could not look away. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it was rapidly taking root. He pulled his arm free from my mother grip and snatched the folder from the table. He flipped the heavy cover open. The room was so quiet you could hear the crisp shuffle of the high-quality paper as he turned the first page. I watched his eyes scan the dense legal jargon. At first, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. He adjusted his glasses, bringing the paper closer to his face. "What kind of nonsense is this?" David muttered, his voice lacking its usual thunder. "This is a loan origination form. It has my address on it." "But the figures are completely wrong." "Look at page 3, David Marcus instructed, his voice calm and unyielding. "Look at the authorized signatures at the bottom of the disclosure agreement." David quickly flipped to the third page. He stared at the bottom of the document. The silence stretched for 3 agonizing seconds before David let out a strange, strangled gasp. He dropped the folder onto the table as if the paper itself had physically burned him. The color drained completely from his face, leaving him looking pale and hollow. "What is it?" David Eleanor demanded, her voice pitching higher with sudden anxiety. She reached for the folder, pulling it toward her. "What did they show you?" "That is a second mortgage," Marcus stated loudly, ensuring every single church elder and society friend in the room heard him clearly. "A second mortgage taken out against the total equity of this Beacon Hill estate. It was finalized and approved exactly 4 months ago. The total loan amount is $4.5 million. Eleanor froze. Her eyes darted from the paper to my father and then to Chad. "That is impossible," my mother stammered, shaking her head in fierce denial. "We own this house outright. We paid off the mortgage a decade ago. We never authorized a new loan. We never signed these papers." "You are absolutely right, Eleanor," I interjected, stepping forward to stand shoulder to shoulder with my husband. "You did not sign them, but someone else did. Someone who had unlimited access to your personal files, your financial records, and your unyielding blind trust. Take a very close look at those signatures, Mom." Eleanor grabbed her reading glasses from the neckline of her dress and shoved them onto her face. She leaned over the document. Her manicured finger traced the ink at the bottom of the page. A loud, sharp scream ripped from her throat. It was a guttural sound of pure, unadulterated horror. "The signatures are forged!" Eleanor shrieked, dropping the paper and stumbling backward. "That is not David's handwriting. That is not my signature. Someone forged our names to steal our equity." Chloe, who had been hiding behind Chad, suddenly pushed past him. She snatched the folder from the table, scanning the numbers. The zeros seemed to stretch on forever. $4.5 million. She looked at the date of the origination. Then slowly, terribly, the realization hit her. "Chad," Chloe whispered, her voice trembling violently. 4 months ago. That was exactly when your hedge fund missed its first major dividend payment. That was when you told me you secured a private injection of capital to keep the firm afloat. Chad took a step backward, his hands raised defensively in front of his chest. "Chloe, listen to me," he stammered, his smooth, arrogant facade completely disintegrating. "It was just a temporary bridge loan. I was going to put the money right back. The market took an unexpected downturn, and I just needed liquid cash to cover the margin calls. I swear, I was going to pay it off before they ever noticed." The illusion of the perfect white son-in-law shattered instantly into a million irreparable pieces. The golden boy, the savior of their social status, the man they had chosen over their own flesh and blood, had just admitted to robbing them blind. "You stole our house!" David roared, the realization fully crashing into his system. You forged our names and stole $5 million from our estate to cover up your pathetic Ponzi scheme? David lunged forward, his hands outstretched, aiming directly for Chad's throat. He did not care about the pastor anymore. He did not care about the church elders watching. His pristine high society image had been violently ripped away, and all that remained was blind, primal rage. Marcus' two massive bodyguards stepped forward, smoothly intercepting my father before he could reach Chad. They did not hurt him, but they formed an impenetrable wall of solid muscle, forcing David back. "Let me go!" David screamed, thrashing against the guards. "I am going to kill him. I gave you everything, Chad. I vouched for you. I put my reputation on the line for you." Eleanor collapsed into a dining chair, sobbing hysterically. Her hands clutched her chest as she rocked back and forth. "My house," she wailed over and over. "My beautiful house. He took my house." Chloe turned on her husband, slapping her hands against his chest. "How could you do this?" she cried, her face contorted in agony. "You told me we were rich. You bought me diamonds. You bought me cars. You bought all of that with my parents' stolen money? You are a fraud." Chad shoved Chloe away, running a frantic hand through his hair. "I was trying to save our lifestyle," he yelled back, sweat pouring down his face. "If the fund collapsed, we would lose everything anyway. I just needed time to flip the market. It was a guaranteed return." "Except the market did not flip," Marcus interrupted, his deep voice slicing through the chaotic screaming match. "And you did not just go to a standard bank for that $4.5 million, did you, Chad? Traditional banks require extensive background checks and in-person notary verifications. You could not risk that level of scrutiny with forged signatures." Chad's face turned a sickening shade of gray. He stopped arguing and stared at Marcus, absolute terror blooming in his eyes. Marcus picked up the red folder from the table, flipping to the very last page. "You went to a shadow lender," Marcus revealed, dropping the final, devastating bomb onto the dining table. "You borrowed that $5 million from a ruthless, unregulated private equity group known for predatory interest rates and aggressive collection tactics." "And the absolute worst part," David Marcus said, locking eyes with my father, "that massive loan secured by this very house has completely and officially defaulted." The word defaulted hung in the stifling air of the formal dining room like a live grenade. David physically swayed, clutching the edge of the mahogany table to keep from collapsing entirely. A deafening silence blanketed the room, broken only by the ragged, desperate breathing of the man who had just bankrupted my parents. Chad scrambled backward, his eyes wide with a feral, trapped panic. He bumped into Chloe, who stood completely frozen, staring at him, as if he were a terrifying stranger who had just broken into her perfect life. The spell broke. Chloe let out a sound that was half shriek, half growl. She lunged forward, raising her hand high, and delivered a vicious, echoing slap directly across Chad's jaw. The sharp crack of her palm striking his cheek caused Pastor Jenkins to flinch violently, spilling his iced tea across his pristine clerical collar. The high society churchwomen, the very people my mother had invited to witness my humiliation, gasped collectively. Some covered their eyes, while others leaned in completely captivated by the grotesque destruction of the golden couple. "You worthless fraud!" Chloe screamed, her voice cracking with pure hysteria. She struck him again, pounding her fists against his chest. "You lied to me. You told me we were royalty. You told me those trips to Aspen and the new Mercedes were paid for with bonuses. You bought my life with my parents' house. You stole my inheritance." Chad grabbed her wrists, shoving her back roughly. "Stop it, Chloe," he barked, his face red with the imprint of her hand. "I did it for you. You are the one who demanded the lifestyle. You wanted the country club membership. You wanted to keep up with Maya. Do not act like you are an innocent victim here. You spent that money just as fast as I stole it." David let out a primal roar. He charged around the dining table, ignoring the bodyguards, his fists clenched at his sides. I will kill you, Chad. I will tear you apart with my bare hands. I let you sleep under my roof. I sat in the front row of your wedding. I gave you my daughter, and you gutted my entire legacy? The room erupted into absolute anarchy. My family tore each other to pieces, stripping away decades of carefully curated manners and respectability. David was screaming about calling the police. Chad was shouting back that if he went down, he would tell the authorities David was complicit in the wire fraud just because his name was on the deed. Chloe was hyperventilating, crying out that she would be homeless, a social pariah, a laughingstock at the Jack and Jill alumni meetings. The church elders began slipping out the front door, eager to distance themselves from a massive federal scandal. They had come to feast on my downfall, but instead they got front-row seats to the annihilation of my parents' fake empire. Eleanor did not join the screaming match. She slowly sank into a dining chair, her hands gripping her hair. She stared at the red folder on the table, the reality of the shadow loan crushing the last remnants of her arrogance. She knew what shadow lenders were. They did not negotiate. They did not grant extensions. They seized assets, ruthlessly auctioned them off, and left their victims on the street. Her Beacon Hill mansion, the ultimate symbol of her superiority, was gone. Unless someone paid it off immediately. Eleanor's eyes slowly lifted from the red folder and locked onto me. I stood perfectly still, watching the chaotic destruction with cold, clinical detachment. Marcus stood by my side, a silent guardian, ensuring no one laid a finger on me. Eleanor saw the custom tailoring of my suit. She remembered the hostile takeover I had executed just 48 hours ago. She realized that standing right in front of her was a woman possessing immense, untethered wealth, the only person on earth who could save her from complete ruin. My mother staggered to her feet. Her legs buckled, and she fell heavily to the floor. She crawled the short distance across the expensive Persian rug, weeping uncontrollably. Eleanor reached out her shaking hands, grabbing the fabric of my dress. She dragged herself onto her knees, looking up at me with a face completely devoid of pride. "Maya, please," Eleanor sobbed, tears and mascara streaming down her cheeks. "Please save us. You have the money. You own an entire private equity firm. You manage billions. $5 million is nothing to you. It is pocket change. Please pay off this shadow lender. Do not let them take my home. I will do anything you want. I will apologize to Marcus. I will get on my knees and beg his forgiveness. I will publicly disown Chad. Just please save this house." She tightened her grip on my dress, burying her face against my legs. "We are blood, Maya. I am your mother. You cannot let me die in the streets. You have to save us from these ruthless people. If they foreclose, we lose everything. We will be homeless. Please, I am begging you." I looked down at the woman who had spent my entire life making me feel like a burden. The woman who had boycotted my wedding, insulted my husband, and tried to force me into federal prison just to protect the white fraud currently cowering in her dining room. I did not feel an ounce of pity. I felt absolute, resolute peace. I gently but firmly reached down and pried her fingers off my dress. I took a step back, forcing her to look up at my cold, unwavering expression. "You do not understand how shadow debt works, Mom," I said, my voice cutting through the sounds of David and Chad arguing. "When a high-risk loan defaults, the original lender does not always handle the foreclosure. They package the bad debt and sell it off at a premium to aggressive private equity firms that specialize in hostile asset seizure." Eleanor stared at me, her breath catching in her throat as a new, profound terror began to dawn in her eyes. "They sold your debt yesterday morning." I continued, stepping closer to her kneeling form. "The shadow lender auctioned off the defaulted note on this very mansion, and a private equity firm bought it immediately in cash." Eleanor trembled. Who? Maya, she whispered. Who bought it? I smiled, the corners of my mouth lifting in a flawless, chilling victory. I bought it, Mom. I own the defaulted debt, which means I officially own this house. The absolute silence that followed my declaration was heavy enough to suffocate everyone remaining in the dining room. Eleanor remained on her knees on the expensive Persian rug. Her mouth opened and closed repeatedly, but no sound managed to escape her throat. David looked as though the floor beneath his feet had suddenly turned to liquid. His eyes darted from me to the bright red folder and back again, his mind desperately trying to reject the brutal reality of his total financial ruin. I did not give them a single second to recover their shattered composure. I reached into my designer leather bag and pulled out a crisp, thick stack of legal documents. I held the paperwork up, letting the overhead chandelier light catch the official embossed seal of the county clerk. With a swift, deliberate flick of my wrist, I dropped the heavy packet directly onto the mahogany table, right next to Chad's forged mortgage documents. The sharp slap of paper hitting wood echoed through the room like a gunshot. That is a formal notice of foreclosure and eviction, I stated, my voice ringing with absolute chilling authority. The title of this property has officially transferred to my private equity firm. You have exactly 30 days to pack up your personal belongings and vacate my premises. If you are still inside this house by midnight on the 30th day, I will have the county sheriff physically remove you, and all your precious possessions will be placed out on the curb for the entire neighborhood to see. Eleanor let out a guttural, agonizing wail. She grabbed the hem of my dress, again her tears soaking through the expensive fabric. Maya, you cannot do this! She screamed, her voice tearing at the seams. We are your parents! We gave you life, we put a roof over your head. You cannot throw your own flesh and blood out onto the cold street. We are family, Maya. Blood matters. You have to show us some mercy. I looked down at the woman weeping pitifully at my feet. The same woman who had spent 32 years treating me like a burdensome stain on her pristine social record. I felt my chest tighten not with pity, but with a fierce, righteous anger that had been simmering in my veins since childhood. I stepped back forcefully, detaching her hands from my dress. Family blood? I asked, my tone dropping to a lethal whisper. You actually want to invoke family blood right now, Eleanor? I pointed a finger directly at Chad, who was still backed against the far wall, trembling like a coward. Where was your fierce loyalty to family blood when I was 19 years old and begging you to help me with my college tuition? I worked double shifts wiping down greasy tables at a local diner just to afford my textbooks. I begged you to co-sign a simple student loan so I could finish my degree. Do you remember what you told me? You coldly told me I needed to learn true independence. You told me that wealth had to be earned the hard way. David tried to interject, his voice weak and shaking. Maya, we were just trying to teach you responsibility. We wanted you to build strong character. You are a complete liar, I shouted, shutting him down instantly. You wanted to build character for your black daughter while you handed out free rides to your white son-in-law. Do not stand there and talk to me about responsibility. Just 2 months after you denied my student loan, you co-signed the financing for Chad, brand new luxury Porsche. You paid the massive down payment on his sports car because he threw a tantrum about needing to look the part for his wealthy hedge fund buddies. You bought him a $90,000 vehicle just so you could brag to your church friends about your elite son-in-law. Eleanor sobbed uncontrollably, covering her face with her hands. Maya, please stop doing this. No, I absolutely will not stop. I continued pacing the length of the long dining table, ensuring every single person in the room heard the absolute, undeniable truth. You starved me of affection. You starved me of support. You watched me work myself to the bone while you poured your life savings into Chad's greedy pockets. You worshipped his proximity to whiteness. You let him make condescending racist remarks about our neighborhood. You let him disrespect your own daughter at every single Sunday dinner because you were hopelessly addicted to the grand illusion of his elite status. I stopped pacing and locked eyes with my broken father. And what exactly did your blind investment buy you, David? It bought you a forged signature on a fraudulent document? It bought you a defaulted shadow loan with astronomical interest rates? It bought you a front row seat to your own total destruction? I am not stealing your home. You gave it away the very second you trusted a fraud over your own blood. I am simply foreclosing on your terrible choices. Chloe remained frozen against the wall, her perfectly styled hair now a tangled, ruined mess. She looked at Chad with pure, undisguised hatred burning in her eyes. You ruined my entire life, she hissed at her husband. You took absolutely everything from me. I am going to end up with nothing because of you. Chad's back hit the wall with a heavy thud. The dark reality of his situation finally shattered the very last remaining fragments of his sanity. He realized he had absolutely nothing left to lose in life. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous, unpredictable creature in any room. Chad snatched a heavy serrated steak knife from the table. He raised the sharp blade high above his head, letting out a wild, feral scream. He quickly lunged forward across the room, aiming the deadly weapon straight for my chest. Before the toe of his expensive leather shoe could even plant itself on the Persian rug for his second step, 3 blindingly bright red laser dots materialized out of the evening darkness. They pierced directly through the floor-to-ceiling dining room windows, slicing through the heavy tension in the room. They did not waver. They did not shake. They locked with terrifying military precision directly onto the center of Chad's white tailored dress shirt. One rested perfectly over his pounding heart. Another marked his throat. The third aimed right between his manic, panicked eyes. Chad froze, completely paralyzed, mid-lunge. The feral scream died instantly in his throat, choking him as he looked down at his own chest. The glowing red dots seemed to burn into the expensive fabric of his shirt. The heavy serrated steak knife trembled violently in his raised hand. The entire dining room descended into a sudden, absolute paralysis. The high society church elders, who had not yet fled out the front door, stood completely petrified, their Bibles clutched to their chests. Eleanor let out a small, suffocated gasp, covering her mouth with both hands to muffle the sound of her own terror. Marcus did not shout. He did not rush. He simply stepped smoothly in front of me, shielding my body completely with his own. The man my parents had spent months mocking as a mere mall cop, the man they called a blue-collar liability who would drag their precious social status into the mud, now stood with the lethal calm of a 4-star general. He slipped his hand into his tailored jacket, unbuttoning it with a slow, deliberate grace that screamed absolute control. His broad shoulders entirely blocked me from Chad's line of sight. "Drop the knife," Chad Marcus commanded. His voice was not loud, but it carried a sub-zero temperature that instantly flash-froze the air in the room. "You are currently being targeted by 3 former Navy SEAL snipers from my executive protection detail. They have been monitoring this dining room from the perimeter wall since we arrived for this little Sunday dinner. They have full federal authorization to use lethal force to neutralize any active threat against a protected asset. And my wife is their highest priority asset. If you move your arm downward, take one single breath that looks aggressive, my team will paint this dining room with your brains before that blade ever touches the floor. Drop it. Now." The steak knife slipped from Chad's sweaty fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, metallic clatter, bouncing harmlessly against the carved leg of the mahogany table. Chad's knees buckled under the crushing weight of his own mortality. He dropped to the floor, collapsing right beside my mother, who scrambled backward in sheer terror to get away from him. Chad raised his hands above his head, tears of absolute panic streaming down his face, as the 3 red laser sights remained completely fixed on his trembling body. He was weeping openly, begging for his life, a complete destruction of the arrogant hedge fund manager who had walked into my penthouse just days ago. I stepped out from behind Marcus, looking down at the pathetic man kneeling in the center of my former childhood home. "You brought a knife to a gunfight, Chad," I said, my voice steady and unforgiving. "You thought because you married into a black family that worshipped your whiteness, you could do whatever you wanted? You thought my parents would always protect you because you gave them access to elite circles? You thought you could steal their money, forge their names, and then murder me in their dining room to cover your tracks. You truly believed your privilege made you bulletproof. But those red dots on your chest prove that no one is bulletproof." Chloe pressed her back hard against the dining room wall, shaking uncontrollably. She looked at the man she had proudly flaunted at every Jack and Jill alumni gala, the man she had used to belittle my own relationship. He was not a wealthy savior. He was a violent, desperate fraud, currently begging for his life on his knees while glowing red targets marked him for death. She finally saw the reality of the monster she had married, just to keep up appearances. Her golden life was nothing but a nightmare wearing a luxury suit. David stood frozen near the head of the table. The patriarch who had demanded I bow to this criminal, who had ordered me to cancel a federal contract to save his country club reputation, now stared at the red lasers illuminating his dining room. He realized that if Marcus had not been there, if I had walked into this house alone like they always wanted, his golden son-in-law would have gladly murdered me to hide his financial crimes. His obsession with elite status had literally invited a killer to his Sunday dinner. He had been willing to sacrifice his own daughter for a man who just tried to stab her through the heart. "You have nothing left, Chad," I continued, ensuring my words pierced through his sobbing. "You do not have the money. You do not have the hedge fund. You do not have this house, because I own it now. And you definitely do not have the power. You are just a common thief who got caught in his own trap. You thought you could use my family insecurities to fund your lifestyle, but you miscalculated. You targeted the wrong sister." Marcus pressed 2 fingers against his earpiece, listening to a swift, tactical update from his perimeter team. He kept his eyes locked on Chad, assessing the threat level before giving a short, sharp nod. "Target is disarmed," Marcus spoke quietly into his lapel microphone. "Stand by for federal entry." The moment Marcus spoke those words, the heavy, terrified silence of the neighborhood shattered entirely. The unmistakable sound of heavy combat boots hitting the concrete driveway echoed loudly through the thick wooden front door. The synchronized marching of a tactical unit sounded like a hammer striking the final nail into the coffin of my parents' elite social standing. Suddenly, the quiet suburban street outside exploded with chaotic, aggressive noise. The deafening wail of multiple sirens pierced the evening air surrounding the entire perimeter of the estate, blocking every single possible escape route. Brilliant, flashing bursts of red and blue lights began violently strobing through the large floor-to-ceiling dining room windows. The frantic alternating colors washed over the terrified faces of my broken family, bathing the room in the harsh, undeniable glow of federal justice. Eleanor let out a whimpering cry as the strobe lights illuminated the absolute wreckage of her perfect life. The remaining church elders finally broke their paralysis, scrambling toward the back hallway to escape the impending raid. They wanted no part of the monumental scandal about to unfold on the evening news. Chad remained on the floor, his hands shaking violently above his head, completely trapped in the blinding crosshairs of the laser sights and the flashing police lights. The sanctuary of high society was officially a massive crime scene. The heavy, solid oak front doors did not just open. They completely splintered inward under the concussive force of a battering ram. The deafening crash shook the crystal chandelier above our heads, sending terrified screams echoing through the formal dining room. A highly coordinated tactical unit of federal agents flooded the grand foyer, wearing heavy dark body armor and gripping tactical rifles. Their boots slammed against the imported marble floors, destroying the quiet sanctity of my parents' pristine home in a matter of seconds. FBI, nobody move. A commanding voice roared over the chaotic din. Hands where we can see them. Drop to the floor right now. Marcus signaled his elite security detail. His snipers instantly powered down their laser sights, transferring the target directly to the federal authorities. Marcus wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me safely out of the direct line of the raid, while we watched the ultimate destruction of the Golden Boy. Two heavily armored federal agents charged straight for the dining room table, ignoring the shrieking church elders who were desperately pressing themselves against the wallpaper. The agents descended entirely on Chad. They did not treat him like an elite hedge fund director. They did not treat him like a respected member of the country club. They treated him exactly like the violent, desperate criminal he had proven himself to be. One agent grabbed Chad by the collar of his expensive tailored suit, yanking him roughly backward before slamming him face first into the expensive Persian rug. Chad let out a pathetic, muffled yelp as his cheek ground into the fabric. The second agent drove a heavy knee directly into the small of Chad's back, pinning him down with inescapable force. The sharp, distinct metallic click of heavy handcuffs snapping shut echoed brutally through the room. "Chad Miller, you are under arrest," the lead agent announced, his voice loud enough for every single person in the room to hear. "You are charged by the Department of Justice with multiple counts of federal wire fraud, corporate espionage, grand larceny, and aggravated forgery. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Chad was sobbing uncontrollably, his tears mixing with the dirt on the floor. He tried to squirm, his voice cracking as he pleaded with the officers. "Please, I have money. You do not understand. I am an executive. I know important people. I can make a deal." The federal agents ignored his pathetic whining. They hauled him up to his feet with zero gentleness. His luxury suit jacket was torn, his tie was skewed, and his face was covered in a humiliating mixture of snot and tears. David, who had staked his entire identity on this white man proximity to wealth, took a frantic step forward. "Officer, wait," David stammered, holding up his hands in a desperate plea. "There has to be a misunderstanding. I am the homeowner. I can call my lawyers. We can sort this out quietly without the neighbors seeing." The lead federal agent turned his hardened gaze onto my father. "Step back, sir," the agent commanded, sharply, resting his hand on his utility belt. "Unless you want to be handcuffed and dragged out of here for aiding and abetting a federal fugitive, you will stay exactly where you are. We already know about the forged mortgage documents on this property. Consider this your only warning." David physically recoiled, his entire body shrinking back into the shadows of the dining room. He had no power here. His loud, booming voice that had belittled me for 32 years was instantly silenced by the reality of federal justice. He looked at Eleanor, who was violently weeping into her hands, completely unable to watch the destruction of her social empire. The agents marched Chad out of the dining room, dragging him through the grand foyer. I watched the walk of shame unfold with absolute, flawless clarity. The high society churchwomen who had tried to weaponize my race and gender to force me into submission now pressed themselves against the walls, staring in pure, unadulterated horror. Pastor Jenkins had completely turned his back, refusing to even make eye contact with Chad. The religious manipulation, the demands for toxic forgiveness, the absolute hypocrisy, all of it burned to ash as the perfect son-in-law was paraded out like common trash. Through the shattered front doors, I could see the flashing red and blue lights illuminating the faces of dozens of wealthy neighbors who had stepped out onto their manicured lawns to watch the spectacle. Chad was shoved roughly into the back of a heavily armored federal transport vehicle. The heavy metal doors slammed shut, severing him from his life of luxury permanently. The flashing lights slowly faded as the convoy rolled away, leaving behind a silent, destroyed house. The silence inside the dining room was suffocating. The illusion was gone. The money was gone. The status was completely eradicated. All that remained was the harsh, brutal reality of what they had done. Chloe had been standing frozen against the wall, her mouth hanging open, as she watched her entire universe collapse. She looked at the empty space on the floor where her husband had just been pinned. She looked at the pastor who was currently rushing toward the back door, eager to distance his megachurch from this radioactive family scandal. She looked at our parents, who were shivering and broken, possessing no home and no retirement funds. Then Chloe slowly turned her wide, terrified eyes toward me. The realization hit her like a freight train. Chad assets were frozen, the house was foreclosed, her credit cards, which were tied to his fraudulent accounts, would be declined by morning. She had absolutely nothing. She had no career, no savings, and no powerful husband to hide behind. The only person in the room who possessed wealth, power, and security was the sister she had mocked and tormented her entire life. A desperate, frantic sob ripped from Chloe's throat. She stumbled forward, her designer heels clicking erratically against the hardwood floor. She practically threw herself across the dining room, rushing directly toward me. "Maya," Chloe wailed, her face contorted in sheer panic. She reached out, grabbing desperately at the sleeve of my blazer, her tears dripping onto her expensive jewelry. "Maya, please, you have to help me. You are the only one left. You have billions of dollars. You have to protect me from the fallout. The media is going to destroy me. The feds are going to freeze my accounts. I will not have any money for food or rent. I am going to be completely homeless." She fell to her knees right in front of me, sobbing hysterically. "You are my sister, Maya," Chloe begged, her voice echoing with pathetic desperation. "We share the same blood. You cannot leave me like this. You have to give me a job at your firm. You have to pay for my lawyers. Please, Maya, I am begging you. You have to save me." Chloe kept her grip on the fabric of my blazer. Her manicured nails dug into the material as if she were dangling from a cliff and I was the only branch left. Her chest heaved with frantic sobs that echoed through the room. The lights from the federal vehicles outside painted her tear-streaked face in alternating colors. "Please, Maya," she whimpered, her voice cracking. "We are sisters. We share the exact same blood. You have an empire, Maya. You can hire corporate lawyers to get Chad out. You can give me a position at your firm so I can keep my country club membership. Just please, do not leave me to face this nightmare alone. I have never been poor. I do not know how to survive without money." I stood motionless, letting her pathetic pleas fill the silence. I looked down at the golden child, the sister who spent her existence stepping on my neck to elevate her own status. The sister who mocked my career choices, flaunted her wealth, and eagerly cheered when her husband threatened me 10 minutes ago. Now she was on her knees, begging for scraps from the very same table she had tried to flip over. I slowly reached down. I moved with the calm precision of a woman who had severed her emotional ties to a toxic past. I firmly grasped Chloe's wrists. I peeled her desperate fingers off my blazer one by one, removing her physical connection to me. I stepped back, creating an undeniable boundary between my reality and her shattered illusion. "We are not sisters, Chloe," I said, my voice completely devoid of warmth. "We just share the same genetic donors. Sisterhood requires loyalty. Sisterhood requires mutual respect. You never wanted a sister. You wanted a scapegoat. You wanted a background character whose failures you could use to highlight your counterfeit perfection. Chloe wiped her nose with the back of her trembling hand, shaking her head in fierce denial. That is not true, she gasped. I always loved you, Maya. I was just caught up in Chad world. He manipulated me, too. You have to believe me. I let out a bitter laugh. Do not try to rewrite history just because you are suddenly holding a losing hand, I told her. You loved the privilege Chad gave you. You loved the racist microaggressions he threw at my husband. You were an eager accomplice right up until the second the federal agents kicked down that door. She collapsed back onto her heels, the final remaining shreds of her arrogance turning to pure, unadulterated despair. But what am I supposed to do, Maya? She wailed. Chad accounts are frozen. The feds are going to seize our house, our cars, everything. I have absolutely nothing left. I looked down at her, feeling a profound, absolute sense of closure. I leaned forward slightly, ensuring my final words to her would be permanently etched into her memory. You boycotted my wedding yesterday, I reminded her, every single syllable carrying the weight of absolute finality. You convinced 76 people to leave empty chairs in my church because you said my husband was a nobody. You said sitting next to a security guard was a massive disgrace to your high society lifestyle. Chloe squeezed her eyes shut, fresh tears spilling over her eyelashes as the harsh, crushing reality of her karma finally landed. I continued straightening my posture. I hope you remember your high society standards when you are waiting in line at the Federal Correctional Facility. Have a wonderful time visiting your husband through a thick pane of plexiglass. Chloe let out a devastated, agonizing cry, burying her face in her hands. She curled into a ball on the floor, mourning the absolute death of her elite social standing. I turned away from her, completely done with her existence. Marcus stood waiting near the shattered entryway. His posture relaxed, but highly alert. He offered me his hand. I placed my palm in his, feeling the solid, unbreakable security of the life I had chosen. We began to walk toward the exit, stepping over the splintered remains of the front door. Maya, please wait. The loud, booming voice of my father echoed through the destroyed foyer. David marched out of the dining room, with Eleanor right on his heels. They looked disheveled, exhausted, and utterly stripped of their country club vanity. But David stubbornly clung to the last pathetic scraps of his patriarchal authority. You do not get to just walk out of here, David shouted, pointing a trembling finger at my back. You are still my daughter. I am your father. You will turn around right now and show your parents some respect. We are losing our home, Maya. We are losing everything we spent 30 years building. You have an obligation to fix this family. Eleanor nodded vigorously, stepping up beside him. You cannot abandon us, she demanded, her voice shrill with desperate entitlement. We gave you life. You are going to call your wealth management firm and arrange a financial rescue package for this family right now. I stopped walking, but I did not let go of Marcus's hand. I did not even turn my head to look at them. I kept my eyes focused straight ahead on the dark, cool evening outside the broken door. The flashing red and blue lights had faded into the distance, taking Chad and their fake legacy with them. Respect is earned, David, I said, my voice echoing clearly through the silent foyer. And you bankrupted yours a very long time ago. I did not wait for his response. I did not listen to Eleanor's sudden shrieking protests. I squeezed Marcus' hand and stepped through the doorway, leaving the wreckage of their toxic empire completely behind me. We walked down the driveway into the cool night air, leaving them to drown in the consequences of their own horrific choices. Exactly 30 days later, the Boston autumn air carried a sharp, biting chill that perfectly matched the atmosphere outside the Beacon Hill estate. I sat quietly in the back of an unmarked Sterling executive vehicle, parked just down the street, watching the final chapter of my parents' grand illusion come to its humiliating end. The 30-day eviction notice had officially expired at exactly 8 o'clock this morning. My legal team, alongside 2 armed county sheriffs, stood on the manicured front lawn, strictly enforcing the absolute perimeter of my property. There were no luxury moving companies. There were no white-gloved attendants carefully wrapping fine art and expensive porcelain. There was only a battered, rusted rental van parked clumsily in the driveway. David, the man who had spent his entire life demanding respect and puffing his chest at country club galas, was currently sweating through a cheap, faded t-shirt. He struggled to lift a heavy cardboard box, slipping on the cobblestone walkway. His face was red, his breathing labored as he shoved the box into the back of the dirty truck. The sleek Mercedes and the luxury SUVs were completely gone, repossessed weeks ago, when the federal government froze every single asset tied to Chad. Massive financial fraud. Eleanor emerged from the heavy oak front doors, carrying a stack of winter coats wrapped in plastic garbage bags. She looked completely unrecognizable. Her hair lacked its usual expensive salon blowout. Her designer clothes had been replaced by a simple gray sweatsuit. She stopped halfway down the front steps, looking up at the massive historic house that had defined her entire identity for decades. She let out a loud, wretched sob, dropping the garbage bags onto the pristine concrete. She fell to her knees, weeping openly on the front lawn for the entire neighborhood to see. Several cars slowed down as they drove past the estate. Wealthy neighbors, the very people my parents had spent years trying to impress, rolled down their windows and stared at the pathetic spectacle. Nobody offered to help. Nobody stopped to offer their condolences. My parents were completely, entirely radioactive. A postal worker walked up the driveway, stepping carefully around my weeping mother to hand a stack of forwarded mail to one of the sheriffs. The officer handed the bundle to David. I watched through the tinted glass of my SUV as my father tore open the top letter. It was printed on heavy, expensive cardstock, bearing the official gold seal of their elite megachurch. Even from a distance, I could see my father's shoulders completely cave inward as he read the words. Pastor Jenkins and the church elders, the same people who had happily eaten my parents' food while attempting to weaponize my trauma, had formally and permanently excommunicated them. The letter explicitly stated that due to the highly publicized nature of the federal fraud and the financial devastation inflicted upon several prominent congregation members, David and Eleanor were permanently banned from the church grounds. Eleanor snatched the second letter from David, shaking hands. This one bore the insignia of the Jack and Jill Alumni Association, the organization she had practically worshipped. The society she had prioritized over her own daughter's mental health had officially revoked her membership. The letter cited a strict moral clause violation. Every single society board, every charity committee, every elite country club had systematically purged my parents from their ranks. They had sacrificed my wedding, my dignity, and my love just to preserve their pristine social standing. Now they had absolutely no money, no home, and no society left to impress. They were entirely socially bankrupt. Eleanor buried her face in her hands, screaming into the cold morning air, as David slumped against the side of the rusted rental van. The sheriffs tapped their watches, indicating that the eviction window was officially closed. They forced my parents to hand over the final sets of keys and ordered them off the property. David climbed into the driver's seat of the rental truck, starting the struggling engine. Eleanor climbed into the passenger side, pulling her hood over her face to hide from the staring neighbors. The truck sputtered loudly, coughing dark exhaust into the air as it slowly rolled out of the elite neighborhood, heading toward a cheap weekly motel on the outskirts of the city. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I felt the pure, unadulterated satisfaction of absolute justice. I tapped the partition separating me from my driver, signaling him to pull away. My business here was completely finished. While my parents were being exiled from high society, Chloe was discovering a completely different kind of hell. She was not with David and Eleanor. Her relationship with our parents had violently imploded the moment the federal agents dragged Chad out of the dining room. They blamed her for bringing a criminal into their home, and she blamed them for not bailing her out of her sudden, catastrophic poverty. Chloe was currently standing on the cracked, dirty sidewalk of a dangerous neighborhood miles away from the luxury boutiques she used to frequent. She gripped the rusted railing of a dilapidated apartment complex, hauling a heavy black trash bag up 3 flights of narrow, foul-smelling stairs. The federal government had seized her custom-built home, her luxury vehicles, and froze every single bank account tied to her name. She had been forced to sign a lease for a tiny roach-infested studio apartment using the absolute last remaining scraps of cash she had hidden in a safe. She kicked the cheap wooden door of her new apartment open, dropping the trash bag onto the stained linoleum floor. The cramped room smelled of stale cigarettes and damp mildew. There was no central heating, no custom island, no panoramic city views. There was only a mattress on the floor and a single folding chair. Chloe sat on the edge of the bare mattress, pulling her phone from her pocket. The screen was cracked. She opened her camera, joining a video call with a local pawn shop owner she had desperately contacted an hour ago. Beside her, on the stained floor, sat 3 pristine, authentic Chanel handbags. The bags she had proudly flaunted in my face for years. The bags she had purchased using stolen money just to prove she was better than me. "I will give you $800 for all 3," the pawn shop buyer grunted through the phone speaker, inspecting the bags through the video feed. Chloe gasped, her eyes wide with frantic panic. "800? These cost over $8,000 each. You are robbing me. I need at least $3,000 to cover my security deposit and buy groceries for the month. I have absolutely nothing left to eat." The buyer laughed, a harsh, dismissive sound. "Your husband is a federal criminal, lady. The feds are probably tracking these bags anyway. 800 is my final offer. Take it or starve." Chloe's lower lip trembled violently. The golden child, the perfect sister who had mocked my hard-working husband and demanded my wealth, was now crying over a cracked phone screen, entirely, completely desperate. The heavy wooden doors of the federal courthouse swung shut with a resounding thud, echoing the absolute finality of the justice system. It had been 7 grueling months since the Federal Bureau of Investigation kicked down the front doors of my parents' Beacon Hill estate. 7 months of aggressive litigation, forensic accounting, and a media circus that completely eviscerated the remaining shreds of my family's social standing. Chad high-priced defense attorneys, the ones my father had desperately promised to fund before realizing he was utterly bankrupt, had abandoned the case on day 2 when their retainer checks bounced. Chad was forced to rely on an overworked public defender who urged him to take a plea deal. But Chad, arrogant to the bitter end, refused. He took it to a jury trial, believing his silver tongue and white-collar privilege would somehow charm the federal prosecutors. He was catastrophically wrong. Inside the sterile, imposing courtroom, the atmosphere was suffocating. Chad stood at the defense table, a hollow shell of the man who had confidently swaggered into my penthouse. His expensive, tailored Italian suits were long gone. He now wore a standard-issue bright orange prison jumpsuit that hung loosely over his shrinking frame. His perfectly styled hair was unkempt, and the arrogant sneer that used to dominate his face had been replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He gripped the edge of the wooden table, his knuckles turning white as the federal judge adjusted his reading glasses and stared down from the high bench. "Chad Miller," the judge announced, his voice booming through the silent room, carrying the absolute weight of federal authority. "You orchestrated a massive predatory financial scheme that deliberately targeted and devastated the life savings of countless innocent investors. You exploited community trust, forged legal documents to steal from your own family, and attempted to commit corporate espionage to cover your tracks. Your utter lack of remorse and blatant arrogance throughout these proceedings have been noted by this court. I hereby sentence you to 20 years in federal prison. This sentence is to be served consecutively, and given the nature of your federal financial crimes, it is entirely without the possibility of early parole. Chad's legs completely gave out. He collapsed back into his hard wooden chair, letting out a loud, pathetic sob that echoed off the high courtroom walls. 20 years. He would be an old, broken man by the time he ever saw the outside of a prison wall again. Sitting entirely alone in the very last row of the public viewing gallery was Chloe, the golden child, the perfect daughter who had spent her entire life stepping on my neck to elevate her own status, was completely unrecognizable. There were no flashing cameras waiting for her. There were no country club friends offering their sympathies. She sat slumped on the hard wooden bench, staring straight ahead with dead, hollow eyes. Chloe was not wearing Chanel. She was not carrying a designer handbag. She was wearing a stiff, scratchy polyester polo shirt in a bright, obnoxious shade of blue. It was the mandatory minimum wage uniform for the big box retail store she now worked for. A cheap plastic name tag was pinned crookedly to her chest. Her hands, which used to boast weekly manicures, were raw and unpolished from unpacking heavy cardboard boxes and scanning barcodes for 8 hours a day. She had been forced to take 2 separate public buses just to make it to the courthouse this morning, terrified that her manager would fire her for taking a long lunch break. Chad turned his head frantically, searching the gallery, until his tear-filled eyes locked onto Chloe. He mouthed her name, lifting his handcuffed wrists toward her in a desperate, pathetic plea for support. He wanted his loyal wife. He wanted the woman who had happily spent his stolen money to stand by his side and validate his victimhood. Chloe did not move a single muscle. She looked at the man who had promised her royalty and handed her absolute poverty. She looked at the bright orange jumpsuit, the heavy iron chains around his wrists, and the armed federal marshals stepping forward to haul him away. She slowly lowered her gaze, staring down at her cheap, scuffed retail sneakers. She did not shed a single tear for him. She picked up her worn canvas tote bag, stood up from the wooden bench, and walked out of the courtroom doors without ever looking back. She had to get back to her shift before she lost the only meager income keeping her from living under a bridge. The fairy tale was officially permanently over. Far away from the depressing, sterile walls of that federal courthouse, I sat in absolute, pristine comfort. I was not sitting on a hard wooden bench. I was reclining in a plush, custom leather armchair inside a highly secured, ultra-luxurious private aviation lounge. The air around me smelled of fresh orchids and expensive espresso. Sterling Executive had recently purchased an entire private terminal at the international airport to service our high-net-worth clientele, and the VIP lounge was reserved strictly for my personal use. I crossed my legs, smoothing the fabric of my impeccable designer suit. I picked up my crystal glass of sparkling water, taking a slow, refreshing sip. Mounted on the sleek marble wall across from me was a massive 90-inch flat-screen television. The breaking news ticker flashed across the bottom of the display in bright, bold letters. Hedge fund director Chad Miller sentenced to 20 years in federal prison for massive Ponzi scheme. I watched the news anchor detail the spectacular fall of the man who had tried to destroy my career. I watched the brief footage of Chad being shoved into the back of a heavily armored federal transport vehicle, his head bowed in absolute disgrace. I felt no pity. I felt no sorrow. I felt the pure, undeniable satisfaction of perfect justice. I picked up the remote and clicked the television off. The screen faded to black, swallowing the image of Chad in his jumpsuit. The quiet hum of the private aviation lounge returned, wrapping around me like a warm, luxurious blanket. Marcus walked through the frosted glass doors of our private suite, his tailored charcoal suit hugging his broad shoulders. He handed me a crystal glass of sparkling water, infused with cucumber. He did not ask what I was watching. He already knew. The federal sentencing had been the top headline on every major financial network all morning. "It is finally done," Marcus said, his voice a low, comforting rumble as he sat in the leather armchair across from me. I took a slow sip of the crisp water. "Yes," I replied, feeling a profound, absolute sense of closure settling deep into my bones. It is completely done. The past 7 months had not just been a masterclass in legal destruction. It had been the most lucrative period of my entire professional career. When the Department of Justice officially raided Chad fraudulent hedge fund, the financial district was thrown into a state of sheer, absolute panic. Hundreds of wealthy institutional investors scrambled frantically to pull their remaining clean assets out of the sinking ship. They needed a new wealth manager. They needed someone with an immaculate, unblemished track record of integrity and aggressive financial protection. They needed me. Apex Holdings, my private equity firm, absorbed the fallout seamlessly. My boutique wealth management company doubled in size overnight. We acquired 3 new floors in the prestigious financial tower downtown. I hired 20 new senior analysts just to handle the massive influx of VIP portfolios transferred directly from the wreckage of my former brother-in-law destroyed empire. The very same church elders and high society socialites who had sat at my grandmother dining table judging my marriage and demanding I sacrifice my career to save Chad were now sitting in my plush waiting room. They practically begged my receptionists for 15 minutes of my time, desperate for me to salvage their compromised retirement funds. I watched their desperate emails flood my inbox, reading their pathetic apologies. They offered me exorbitant management fees and promised to publicly endorse my firm at their future galas. I sent those emails directly to the trash folder. I declined every one of their requests. I instructed my legal team to issue rejection letters, citing a strict conflict of interest policy. I refused to let their toxic, panicked energy infiltrate the pristine financial sanctuary I had built. I was no longer the quiet sister who faded into the background, allowing arrogant people to step all over my dignity. I was the undisputed leading authority in elite wealth management on the entire East Coast. Marcus experienced a similar meteoric rise. The viral 16-second video posted by the billionaire rapper on our wedding day had already catapulted Sterling Executive into the global spotlight. But the flawless, highly publicized execution of the Department of Justice Witness Protection contract cemented his reputation as an absolute titan in the private security sector. Sterling Executive was no longer just protecting Hollywood celebrities and tech moguls. Marcus was aggressively securing exclusive international contracts requiring top security clearance. His massive firm was now actively providing elite tactical details for visiting foreign dignitaries, powerful international royalty, and global diplomats attending incredibly high-stakes political summits across the globe. He had completely transformed a domestic operation into an international fortress. We were operating at the absolute peak of our respective industries. We were an impenetrable power couple, moving silently through rooms where billion-dollar deals were negotiated. We did not need to attend flashy Jack and Jill charity galas to prove our worth. We did not need to sit in the front pews of megachurches, dripping in designer labels to seek validation from hypocritical peers. We had cultivated a fiercely guarded, beautiful peace. Our home was a fortress of mutual respect, trust, and genuine authentic love. We celebrated our victories privately, entirely free from the suffocating, toxic weight of my family's relentless social climbing. A flight attendant in a crisp navy uniform approached our seating area with a polite smile. Miss Sterling, she said, her voice soft and deferential. Your private helicopter is fueled and ready for boarding whenever you and Mr. Sterling are ready. Thank you, I replied, setting my crystal glass down on the table. We will be right out. I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. Marcus stood with me, his hand naturally finding the small of my back. We were finally leaving for our delayed honeymoon. A completely disconnected escape to a private island in the Maldives. No business calls, no federal court updates, just the two of us and the crystal clear ocean. I reached into my tote bag to retrieve my passport when my personal cell phone suddenly vibrated sharply against my fingertips. I rarely gave this specific number out. It was reserved exclusively for absolute emergencies and highly classified client communications. I pulled the device from my bag, looking down at the illuminated screen. The caller ID did not display a name, but I recognized the Boston area code immediately. A lengthy text message filled the display. I read the first few lines and my jaw tightened. Maya, please do not ignore this. It is your mother. David is sick. The stress of the eviction and the public humiliation has completely destroyed his heart. We are living in a cramped apartment, and I do not have enough money to cover his medical copays. Chloe will not speak to us. She blames us for everything Chad did. I know we failed you, Maya. I know we made unforgivable choices, but you are the only one left who has the power to help us. Please, Maya. You have your revenge. You won. I am begging you, on my hands and knees for one chance. Please, call your mother back. I stared at the glowing screen of my private cell phone, reading the lengthy, desperate text message from Eleanor one more time. The block of text was a desperate masterpiece of emotional manipulation, perfectly crafted by a woman who had spent 32 years perfecting the art of weaponizing guilt. She wanted me to pity David. She wanted me to feel responsible for his failing health. She wanted me to believe that the crushing weight of their poverty was somehow a burden I was obligated to carry. But reading those frantic, pleading words, I did not feel a single ounce of obligation. I did not feel guilt. I did not even feel anger. I simply felt an overwhelming, profound emptiness regarding the people who had brought me into this world. Eleanor was not apologizing because she suddenly realized the error of her ways. She was not expressing genuine remorse for boycotting my wedding, for treating my hard-working husband like garbage, or for trying to force me into federal prison to protect a white-collar criminal. She was apologizing because she was broke. She was begging because the luxurious Beacon Hill mansion was gone. The country club memberships were revoked, and the megachurch had completely excommunicated her. She only wanted me now because I possessed the billions of dollars she desperately needed to fund her survival. Her love was still entirely conditional. It was just conditioned on my bank account instead of my obedience. I did not type a single letter in response. I did not offer her the satisfaction of my anger or the closure of my forgiveness. I simply let the screen go black. The silence I offered was the final, absolute answer to a lifetime of their toxic noise. Marcus placed a warm, gentle hand on my lower back, drawing my attention away from the dark phone screen. I turned to look at the man who had stood beside me against the entire world. He looked incredibly handsome, the sharp lines of his tailored suit contrasting perfectly with the dangerous, protective energy he carried effortlessly. "Are you ready to leave, Mrs. Sterling?" Marcus asked, his deep voice resonating with pure affection and unwavering loyalty. "I am completely ready," I replied, flashing him a genuine, radiant smile. "I have absolutely nothing left to do here." We walked together through the frosted glass doors of the private aviation lounge, stepping out onto the pristine tarmac. The cool, crisp ocean breeze whipped around us, carrying the distinct scent of jet fuel and absolute freedom. Waiting for us at the center of the helipad was a massive, state-of-the-art helicopter bearing the sleek silver logo of Sterling Executive. The massive rotor blades sliced through the air with a powerful rhythmic thud, creating a magnificent symphony of raw mechanical power. Flanking the aircraft were 4 heavily armed tactical guards standing at perfect military attention. They saluted Marcus as we approached, treating him with the profound respect he had always deserved. We were not just taking a flight. We were officially beginning our delayed honeymoon. We were flying to a private airstrip to board a chartered Gulfstream jet that would take us directly to an exclusive, secluded island in the Maldives. No business acquisitions, no federal court updates, no toxic family drama, just endless, crystal-clear water, white sand, and the absolute peace of our unbreakable union. Marcus extended his hand, helping me step up into the incredibly luxurious cabin of the helicopter. The interior was a masterpiece of modern aviation design, featuring plush white leather captain chairs, polished wood paneling, and a chilled bottle of vintage champagne waiting in a silver bucket. I settled into the soft leather, fastening my safety harness as Marcus took the seat right beside me. He immediately intertwined his fingers with mine, anchoring me to my beautiful new reality. The pilot voice crackled through our noise-canceling headsets, confirming our flight path. The massive engine roared, surging with power, as the helicopter smoothly lifted off the ground. My stomach did a tiny, thrilling flutter as we ascended rapidly, leaving the solid concrete tarmac far below us. I looked out the large, clear window, watching the sprawling city of Boston shrink into a miniature grid of streets and skyscrapers. Down there in those tiny, cramped apartments and shadowed alleys, my parents were currently suffocating under the crushing weight of their own catastrophic choices. Down there, Chloe was scanning barcodes for minimum wage, mourning the death of her counterfeit elite lifestyle. Down there, Chad was sitting in a federal prison cell, wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, facing 2 decades of absolute misery. I reached into my designer tote bag and pulled out the private cell phone one last time. I removed the protective case and used a small pin to pop open the side tray. With precise, deliberate movements, I extracted the tiny plastic SIM card. This minuscule chip was the absolute last remaining tether connecting me to my toxic family. It was the only way they could ever reach me, beg me, or attempt to drag me back down into their miserable orbit. I unlatched the small circular ventilation window built into the side of the helicopter glass door. The rushing high-altitude wind instantly howled against the small opening. I held the tiny SIM card between my thumb and index finger. I did not hesitate. I did not look back. I released my grip. The violent, rushing wind instantly snatched the plastic chip, whipping it away into the vast, endless expanse of the sky. It disappeared, completely swallowed by the atmosphere, gone forever. My past was officially, permanently erased. I closed the small ventilation latch, sealing the luxurious cabin in perfect, tranquil silence once again. I turned away from the window, shifting my weight so I could lean my head comfortably against Marcus' strong shoulder. He wrapped his arms securely around me, pulling me close. I looked out toward the horizon, finally free. I won. The core lesson from this story is that your worth is never defined by toxic family members who constantly underestimate you. True power comes from quiet resilience, building your own independence, and refusing to accept conditional love. When faced with betrayal, the ultimate revenge isn't loud arguments, but undeniable success and ironclad boundaries. By walking away from manipulation and standing firmly in your own truth, you reclaim your life and force their hypocrisy into the light. Have you ever had to cut ties with toxic relatives to protect your peace? Share your story below and hit subscribe for more videos.